is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 438. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, did you get to play any pre-releases?
I did. I played one normal pre-release at Game Heroes, a store here in Denver.
Very cool.
It was pretty fun. We actually rolled out with a pretty nice crew. We had, myself, Gabby, Josh Utterley, Zach Hill randomly showed up.
Zach Hill was there?
Yep. He was in Denver for, unknown reasons and asked if I was going to the pre-release, and I said I was. We had BK, Andrew Beckstrom, and then four of our coworkers. Ben Lundquist was also there. Just all these people who we hang out with and work with, and then Zach Hill. So I think we had 12 people at the pre-release. It was really sweet.
Wow, you were rolling deep, buddy.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun.
How did it go? Did you take it down?
I went 3-1, losing to my coworker Annie. She just beat the crap out of me, and
oh man,
got enough packs. Yeah. Oh yeah.
At the office.
Oh yeah, she's insufferable. Got enough packs to draft, and even did a draft afterwards. So it was a successful outing.
Very nice. Yes, I got a chance to do two of them, both of them on Saturday. I went out to Mock's Boarding House with my buddy Adam, and a friend of ours, Michael, and another friend, Christian, came, and we all kind of met there, and it was fun. Definitely a wily crowd out as well. There was they sold it out, and boy, people were stoked for Dominaria. There's something about the combination of it not being Ixalan and also it being nostalgic or whatever, and people were really excited about it. I think 3 to 4 times I heard somebody just screech out "Yargle" when they opened it during their build. So yeah, they hit a chord with this one for sure. And of course, this episode of the podcast is the Dominaria set review, rare and mythic rare. So we're going to be going over every single one of those in the set this week and getting down into the details of these more complex cards, oftentimes more powerful, rares and mythics. So first things first, though, our sponsor, channelfireball.com. That is the place to go on the internet for everything you need Magic related. And I always talk about the content because it lines up so well with what we do here on LR, which is why LR is on Channel Fireball and why it's such a great partnership, is they also want to help you improve at the game. They know that you value that you going out to your shop and spending your hard-earned dollars on cards and trying to win F&Ms and trying to qualify for whatever it is that you're trying to qualify for. It takes a lot of work and effort, and this is a way that you can actually get ahead. And what you can do is you can go to the content that's absolutely free on the front page of Channel Fireball. And we've got videos and articles laid out by some of the best players and thinkers in the world at Magic, and they're going to walk you through their thought processes and let you know how those things go, including videos of Dominaria. Luis, you have a sealed deck that you did on Magic Online on Friday. I have one up as well that I did on Friday. So if you want to get our very early takes on the format, I mean, for me, it was my first event of the format period. I'm assuming you too?
Yes. It was not only my first event, I also learned what Hexproof did, for players. But
I'm sure they taught you too.
Oh yeah,
I saw your tweet. Anyway, but yeah, that's all free and right on the front page of channelfireball.com. And then, of course, while you're there, pre-order Dominaria. You can get it right now. They'll ship it to you right when it's ready to go. You can get singles if you just need specific cards for a deck or just want to have them. You can get them, or you can get sealed product as well, and they will send it out to you. Channelfireball.com is the place to go for that. Now, if you want to support the show directly, you can do so as well. Patreon is the place to do it. It's a place that is set up to help people give back to the content producers that they want to thank via money. Basically, it's like, hey, this show is free, and Limited Resources, of course, is for free. But if you think, you know what, I've gotten a lot out of this and I like to support these guys, that's the place to do it over there at Patreon. You get some cool bonuses for doing so. Okay, so let's cruise through this, Luis, because we got a decent chunk of cards to cover here in Dominaria. Let's talk about our grading scale and why we do it.
Alrighty, so our grading scale starting at the top starts with A. So A's are bombs. They're game winners. They're cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind. And they're the best cards in the set. You're going to see a lot of A's here in the Rare Mythic set review. These are cards like Tetzimoc, Profane Procession, and Ravenous Chupacabra. Next up, we've got bees. Bees are cards that actively pull you towards their colors or their clan, guild, any of those things. And in this particular set, it's just colors. There's nothing going on that's more complicated than that. And bees are cards that end up being like premium removal, good uncommons, or the best commons. So cards like Bombard, Crested Herdcaller, Deadeye Brawler, Impale. Seas are playable. These are the Pawns Unlimited. These are the cards you have a bunch of. Every deck you draft is going to have a bunch of Seas in it. They're pretty interchangeable, and there's not actually that many at Rare in Mythic, but these are cards like Kitesail Corsair, Exultant Sky Marcher, and Fathom Fleet Border. Ds are sometimes playable. You'd prefer not to run them. They're mediocre / junky cards. Often they're situational or have a high setup cost. And if a D makes the cut, then you're not going to be very happy with your draft. So these are cards like Pitiless Plunderer, Raptor Companion, or Rozka Raptor. It's not actually that many Ds either. Next up is the category that you end up with a lot of, though. These are Fs. Yeah. These are cards that are unplayable in virtually all scenarios. Incredibly narrow cards, rares with 26 lines of text, cards like Silent Gravestone, Storm the Vault, Brass's Bounty, Induced Amnesia. So these are the kind of cards that you will see a lot of at Rare. Then we have sideboard, cards that you wouldn't main deck, but you would sideboard in and get a separate grade for that because they're pretty good when you do sideboard them in. Mm-hmm. And build around. So there's not very many sideboard rares, but there are plenty of build around. These are cards that by themselves are not typically good enough, but when you build around them, when you have enough other cards that go with them, they end up being all-stars. So that is our grading scale. And like I said, you're going to see way more A's and B's than at common, and also way more F's.
That's right. Yeah, these tend to be very polarizing. So we are going to be kicking things off with blue. We rotate the color that we start with, and we are on blue for Dominaria. And that leaves us with our first one. It's a rare, and right out of the gate, it's a saga. And there's quite a few sagas at the rare and mythic rare slot. As you might imagine, there's a lot of design space to play with, and they certainly didn't leave that fallow. So the first one is called The Antiquities War. It is 3 and a blue for a rare saga. And the first 2 chapters are the same. So look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. And then you put the rest, on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, okay, you're kind of searching your way through your deck for artifacts somehow. The third chapter, this is of course the last one, says artifacts you control become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn.
I'm not particularly impressed with the Antiquities War.
Are we building around for this? This makes me think build around when I first see it.
It is a build around. It is a card that you have to build your deck to maximize. The problem is you're just not going to get the critical mass of artifacts. You're just not going to have a deck with 8 or 9 artifacts. It's going to be very difficult to imagine that. And as a result, you end up with a card that's going to miss on drawing you a card enough of the time that it just doesn't end up paying for itself. And then making 1 or 2 artifacts of 5/5, especially if some of them are creatures already, is just not that great of a deal. So I every time my opponent has cast the Antiquities War, I've thought, great, Yeah,
no problem. 4 mana, not do a whole lot, doesn't affect the board. Yeah, oof. I'm not a big fan of it either.
No, I don't think it gets there.
I would give it a build around because you do have to, you can't just simply take this card and put it in your deck. But I don't even love it as a build around because of the constraints it puts on you to play all of these random artifacts that you might not really want. So I would say Antiquities War is something like a build around C or a build around D. I'm just not excited about it.
I would give it a build around D. I just don't think you're going to play this card very often.
All right, next is called Karn's Temporal Sundering, and this is another rare. This one is, of course, a new type of card. It's called a legendary sorcery, and the catch with legendary sorceries is that you have to control a legendary creature or planeswalker to cast this spell. So that is a that is a rain cloud that is going to follow these legendary sorceries and makes them very tricky to evaluate. Because I'm going to read it now, and you're going to, most of them you're like, wow, but it is so tricky to actually cast these. So this one is 4 blue. Target player takes an extra turn after this one, return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and then exile Karn's Temporal Sundering. So bounce something, and you get to take an extra turn for 6 mana. A great deal, but boy, legendary sorcery makes it difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, if this card didn't have the legendary sorcery clause, I think we would be giving it like a B+.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Maybe
taking an extra turn's a little overrated, but yeah.
At the very least, it would be very good. with that clause, it goes, first of all, straight into the build around camp, because yes, your average limited deck is going to have, a couple legends just based on the numbers. There's a legend in every pack.
Mm-hmm.
But this still counts as a build around. You can't just put this in a deck without at least considering how it's going to interact or doing some work. And as a result, I think this gets a build around B. I think if you can end up with like 3 or 4 legends, then, this card is certainly worth the payoff, or like the payoff is worth the effort, but it's just not a card you can slot in everywhere.
Yeah. What is the number? Because you said 3 or 4, but that still makes me nervous, man.
Well, 3 or 4 I think
where's your comfort? Where are you feeling like I'm okay here?
At 5, I think you're very happy with this card.
Yeah, I was thinking between 5 and 6, not 5 and 4, 5 and because the problem is, think about it like this. You're like, okay, I have these legends. The legends are often your best creatures in addition to being legendary, and they're therefore the most likely to get killed by your opponent's removal spells anyway, like incidentally. And so then on top of it, you do need to have that legend on the battlefield when you want to cast the legendary sorcery. So it's tricky. It is not as easy as it seems. And you will lose games staring at these in your hand, but boy, the upside on some of these is really, really strong. I like, by the way, that you said, let's just build around all of these, right? Because you just simply cannot put them in your deck. So what was your grade on the build around?
I'll give it a build around B.
I like that. All right. What does the Mirari Conjecture do?
This is a saga. It's 4 and a blue. The first chapter is return target instant from your graveyard to your hand. Mm-hmm. The second one is return target sorcery from your graveyard to your hand.
All right.
And the third one says, until end of turn, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you copy it. You choose new targets for the copy. Or you may choose new targets, so you can actually double target the same thing.
Okay. So, that's cool, right? I mean, you just hold them in your hand and then it doesn't cost any mana when it gets to that third chapter. So you theoretically could cast both of the things that you got back.
Yeah. So the first time I read this, I thought it was just return target instant or sorcery, but it is just instants, then just sorceries. So It's not as simple as saying like, okay, I have 10 spells in my deck. It's like you want like 4 or 5 instants and 4 or 5 sorceries.
Right.
Because if you have 8 instants and sorceries, you're going to brick on one of the modes. Mm-hmm. You are excused. And
thank you.
If you're not hitting drawing 2 cards off this, often it's not going to do quite enough. Though if you have enough cheap instants, for example, like if you had a deck that had like 3 Sheevan Fires and like a blink of an eye and a couple more like a Wizard's Lightning and like maybe one more good instant, mm-hmm. then I could see still running this, because the turn where you copy everything, if you can play 2 removal spells on that turn, like that's amazing.
Yeah. Very slow though in that scenario, right? 5 mana to get the instant back. Then let's say you whiff on the sorcery. You're just like, yeah, nothing happens the next turn. And then the turn after that, you kind of go off, but your opponent can also see it coming. It
is slow, and you're going to want to try to have a play on the intervening turn, which hopefully isn't one of your instants or sorceries. Like what you want to do is play this on 5, get back a spell, turn 6, play like a creature to block with, and then turn 7, just double spell. And that is kind of like the dream. Whether that will actually happen is, well, it's kind of up to your deck. So this is another build around. I would give this like a build around. I think it's a build around B. I think in a deck with a lot of good interactive spells, this is going to be a good finisher.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth clarifying here as well. That third chapter is just any instants or sorceries you spell that, you cast that turn. It doesn't matter if you got them back.
They weren't the specific ones you got back now.
Yeah, and that's important, because if you can set up a scenario where, okay, fine, you got 1 back, right? But then you just ended up casting 2 spells that turn that triggered this, you're definitely getting your value. So build around.
I'll give it a build around B.
B? Okay. Cool card too. I like.
I look forward to trying this card.
Yeah.
Granted, Sealed's a little different than Draft, but I did see one of my friends go off with this in Sealed, and it looked impressive. It's like, all right, yeah, I can see this doing some really good work.
Definitely. All right. Next one is called Naban, Dean of Iteration. This is a legendary creature human wizard, 1 and a blue for a 2/1, and Naban is a rare. If a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. It's a little wordy, right? But it just says, enters the battlefield stuff from wizards gets to happen twice.
Yes, or if you had a creature that says, or a spell, or a card permanent rather, that says like, whenever you play a creature, draw a card, then or whenever a creature comes into play, draw a card. Which is, I guess, I don't know if there's even anything like that in the set, but your wizards triggering that would also double up. But I actually don't even think that is a thing.
But what about there's a Joyra? Like, what if you cast a legendary wizard?
It wouldn't help because it's only on entering the battlefield. And that is like
and she's a cast trigger.
That's a when played trigger, yeah. So
I understand.
Nabon is fine. Like
he's fine. He's totally fine.
Academy Journey Mage, the 3/2 bounce wizard is the first place I'd go. There's also like the uncommon one that shoots something for the number of wizards you have in play, and then the common that deals 2, the Fire Slinger or Flinger or whatever. Mm-hmm. Add all that together, you've still got to see.
I think we have the ultra rare here, right? The rare that's a C. Yeah, Nabon is a C. He's totally fine. Yep. I mean, the main thing is the Mana War, right? I mean, that's the one that you're just like, that's what
there's some decks you're going to play Nabon. It's got 3 interactions. It's going to be like a C+. But this is not a build around. You don't see Nabon first and snag those cards because those cards are all like high picks themselves. You're not really you're not going to get a ton of them.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. This is a common, like in between a common and uncommon power level card that's just too complicated to print at those rarities with that text box, so it's a rare. Next one, also a wizard. This one's mythic though. It's Naru Meha Master Wizard, and she's legendary creature, human wizard, 2 blue, 3/3 with flash. So let's do the French vanilla test on that one. Where do we think about a 4 mana 3/3 flash? Something you can maybe ambush a blocker in or something like that.
Playable.
Playable.
I think you almost always play that, especially in this particular case. There's the wizard creature type.
Yeah, so C+ range, somewhat like that. Yeah. Now, she's got an ability. When Naru Meha Master Wizard enters the battlefield, to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. Now, there's another line of text that's simpler. I'm going to read it real quick. It's other wizards you control get +1/+1. So we have a wizard lord here on top of all of it. But that middle line is a little bit tricky because I think if you haven't had a card like that, you'd go, how does that work? And how it works is you cast an instant or sorcery, and with it on the stack, you then cast Naru Meha Master Wizard and then target the thing on the stack, and then it doubles, it'll repeat it, which means you are adding 2 blue to the instant or sorcery that you would like to copy, which is a lot.
It is. And I'll add all this together. I actually don't think I would put Naru Meha in the category of build around because she does 3 different things. She's a 3/3 flash, she buffs all your wizards, and she copies a spell. Add all those together, I think you just have a good card. There's just very few blue decks that won't use 1, 2, or maybe even all 3 of those abilities. Mm-hmm. You really want to prioritize cheap spells, like Shivan Fire is the best spell possible. Cost 1 mana to deal 2, then you play her and kill another thing. Copying Opt is also pretty nice. And then going up the chain, you could copy like Blink of an Eye without too much trouble or Vicious Offering. So I think Naru Meha is just really good. I would start a draft with her almost any time. I would give her a B+. She's not quite an A.
I was going to say B+ also.
But she gets there for sure.
Yeah. And the upside's very high, where the downside is not that low. And that's a kind of card I love. Next is called Precognition Field. This is 3 and a blue for an enchantment at rare. And it says you may look at the top card of your library. So that's just something you can do anytime you want. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery card. And interestingly, you know that, but they don't. And then it also has an activated ability. You can pay 3 mana to exile the top card of your library. It's an interesting card, man.
Yeah, it is. I don't love it, though. I think you'd need a lot of instants and sorceries. And even then, you're paying 4 mana and then hoping that they show up at a time where you'd want to cast them. Because if you play this and your top card is like Blink of an Eye, right? The bounce spell. Mm-hmm. And then you're forced to Blink of an Eye like one of their 2/2s or waste the precognition ability. You didn't get the full value because you would have preferred to save that. Or likewise, if you're like, okay, well, there's an Eviscerate on top of my deck. They have a 3/3 in play. I guess I cast it to get my extra card because otherwise I'm going to draw it and no longer, get that bonus.
Right.
But then you'd rather have Eviscerate. Like that doesn't line up great. And you'd also just need like 8.
How many are you going to have?
8 or 10, 8 to 10 spells. Otherwise, this is just not going to be worth a card. It needs to draw you 3 cards over the course of the game before you really feel like you got there. And exiling the top card is good because even in a deck without too many instants or sorceries, I guess you could use this as like a bad scry. But it's just really expensive. I think there were some decks that will play this. I think this is a build around, and I would give it like a build around like C+.
Yeah, I was going to say build around C. I'm not stoked on it, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that you'll be able to run enough instants or sorceries to make this full value because like you said, 8 to 10. Well, I mean, Most of the decks these days have like an enchantment in them, like an art, like a non-creature artifact. Like the one nice place is if you can play sorceries or instants that make or are creatures effectively. That part I like because you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. But realistically, you're probably going to have 3 to 6 or 3 to 5 instants or sorceries, and that's not enough to make this thing great.
I could see this being good enough for sealed in some very niche sealed decks, but for the most part, no.
Yeah. All right. Next is Tempest Djinn, which is part of a cycle, right? There's a one rare for each of these colors, a triple blue it costs. So we'll talk about that in a second. But Tempest Djinn is a rare that's an 0/4 with flying, and it gets +1/+0 for each basic island you control.
So I've actually cast this card in draft. The one draft cool. I did, I had a nearly mono blue deck that had 12 islands and 5 mountains, plus a Skittering Surveyor. And Tempest Djinn was amazing. I think that this cycle of cards are all very powerful.
Yes.
And what you want to look for, there's 2 things you want to look at. Because I think they're almost essentially build-arounds in the sense that when I second picked Tempest Djinn, I just was mentally aiming towards having a deck that could play like 11 or 12 islands.
Right.
And that's near build around level. It's like saying like, hey, I'm going to make a few card quality sacrifices to be mono blue or as close to mono blue as possible. And then the second thing you need to think of is what happens if you play this on turn 6, because in, let's say, a 9-8 split, when you have 6 lands in play, then you could like reasonably expect to have 3 of one color. So some of these do well on the test. Tempest Djinn does. Some of them do less well. Like when we get to the Goblin Chain Whirler or the red one, we're going to see that. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I think Tempest Djinn's quite good. If you can cast it on turn 3, you're just going to beat the crap out of your opponent. And if you cast it on turn 6, it's still a 3/4 flyer or a 4/4 flyer.
Yep.
It's good at any point in the game. So,
yep. And still continues to get better as the game goes as well.
So I'd give this a build around, but I would say it's like a build around B+. It's a very rewarding if you get there.
I like it. That I think perfect breakdown for Tempest Djinn. Next is a card I got to cast a couple of times. Really sweet. Zahid Djinn of the Lamp is 4 blue for a 5/6 flying. It's legendary Djinn at rare. So right there, I'm like, I'm in. Right? I mean, those stats are very
that's already
nice.
like a solid B. Maybe B+ actually.
Right. Yeah. But it's got this alternate casting cost that's really cool. You may pay 3 in a blue and tap an untapped artifact you control rather than pay the spell's mana cost. 4 mana, you can get a 5/6 flyer.
Yeah. Turn 3 Skittering Surveyor, turn 4 Zahid.
What? Yeah, GG. Yeah. And one of the neat things, like I had this in one of my sealeds, and I like attacked with some stuff, and I had an equipment. I can't remember, maybe it was the Joust or whatever, and I tapped that.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of people.
No cost.
Yeah. Right. Because a lot of people will, when they attack, in fact, I do this, like just turn both things sideways, but the equipment actually doesn't tap even when you attack with a creature. It stays untapped, and like you said, it's just basically free. I loved Zahid. I mean, this isn't a complicated card. It's pretty straightforward, but boy, I loved it. That alternate casting cost is very real.
Yeah, I think that pushes Zahid from probably like a B+ to an A-.
Agreed.
And not even a build around. You put this in any deck, but if you just have 2 or 3 incidental artifacts, and there's plenty in the set, you just a short sword or Urza's Tome or a Skittering Surveyor, you're just sometimes going to just win games essentially for free by playing turn 4 Zahid. So I would give Zahid Djinn of the Lamp an A-.
I would too. A- for Zahid. The blue rares are really cool. They, again, I mentioned this in the last review, but they felt blue. There's lots of flyers and djinns, and then stuff that has to do with your library and or instants and sorceries. That kind of stuff. 2
djinns out of 8 rares is a lot of djinns.
That is a high djinn count. There's no doubt. All right, let's move on to black.
Hijinks.
Our first one is a bit of a joke of a card. It is Demon Lord Belzenlock, and this card is fantastic. It's 4 black for a 6/6 flying trample legendary elder demon. Mythic rare, as you might guess. When a Demon Lord Belzenlock enters a battlefield, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card, then put that card into your hand. If the card's converted mana cost is 4 or greater, repeat this process. Demon Lord Belzenlock deals 1 damage to you for each card put into your hand this way. I got to tell you, I feel like Demon Lord Belzenlock should have opened a little higher on the negotiations, because 1 damage per card is no problem. I would have still played this card happily if it was, say, 2 damage. 3 is getting a little up there, but this card is absolutely absurd. I had it in and actually it's going to be in a video that's going up on Channel Fireball. But this thing, dude, wait till you see the video, my friend. It was absurd. This card is so fantastic. The crazy part about it is that like it's this sort of rich get richer style card where you pay your 6 mana for your huge 6/6 flying trampler you're already thrilled about, and then like you get to draw a spell no matter what. So you're getting that. But then if you hit, it meant that it was a 4 cost or more spell, which is, of course, what you want when you've already got 6 mana. And then that means you get to repeat that process. Like at one point I drew 2 5-drops and a 6-drop off of it after I had cast it. I'm just like, how can I ever lose this game? I've just reloaded, got a bunch of lands away. Anyway, I'm in love with Demon Lord Bells Unlock. It's pure value. It's not even that hard to cast at 6 mana, and I'd give him an A or an A+. You can choose.
I would give Demon Lord Bells Unlock an A. A+ is reserved for cards that will help you when you're really far behind, which this doesn't. But
this is the TRGR.
There are no other complaints here, especially this format is gearing up to be a little on the slow side, which this card's really going to shine. So an easy A for Demon Lord Bells Unlock, which moves us on to Dreadshade. This is another one of the triple color cards. It's black, black, black for a 3/3 shade at rare. And you can pay a black to give it +1/+1 until end of turn.
I don't like this one nearly as much as the Tempest Djinn.
No, it's not as good because on turn 6 it doesn't scale as well. Like this always untaps and attacks at least as a 6/6, right? If you can cast it, you can pump it 3 times. But it doesn't have trample, and there's just going to be games where your opponent has some saplings out, and this doesn't really just rampage all that much. But it's still pretty solid. It is going to be the biggest creature on the battlefield, or threatened to be most of the time. And I think if I saw this early, like I would move in on Tempest Djinn very early. Like if I had a blue card and saw Tempest Djinn second, which is actually what happened, I feel you can get paid off. Whereas with Dreadshade, I don't think I would necessarily move in on this like at that point, but I would take Dreadshade if I had like 3 or 4 black cards and I end up seeing that in the middle of the pack.
Okay. I mean, we're still build arounding for Dreadshade, right? It's
still a build around, but whereas Tempest Djinn was like a B+, and I think might even be an A- and thinking about it more, just how good it is, Dreadshade's like a C+. It's the kind of card which I think you'll play if you have 10 or more swamps in your deck, and is worth trying to maybe stretch from 9 to 11 swamps by like playing a slightly different configuration of cards. But it's not a card I'm second pick. Like if I have an Eviscerate and I see Dreadshade versus like Sheevan Fire, I'm just going to take the Sheevan Fire.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And that's a build around C+. Like keep that in mind when you're choosing to pick it. This next card's interesting. It's I'll read it first.
It's interesting a way to say obscenely powerful.
Yeah, like the thing I find interesting about it is I have a theory on reverse engineering the design of this card. So it's Josu Vess Lich Knight, 2 black, 4/5. It's a legendary zombie knight. It's a rare. So it has menace. So you're talking about a 4 mana 4/5 menace for 4 mana 4/5 menace. So right there, you're already minimum a B, maybe even a B+, like just a super rock solid card, right? Great stats, tough to kill, great attacker. They have to double block and it survives. Really good. It's got kicker, 5 and a black. So this is hefty. We are now talking about spending 10 mana, 7 black, black, black. Big cost. But here's what you get. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you get 8 2/2 black knight zombie or zombie knight creature tokens with menace. 8.
And the fact that they have menace is really relevant. I have been on every side of this card. I've kicked it. I have seen it kicked. I've played against it in all the modes. And the fact that they have menace really decides more games than you might think. So
it decides the game the next turn. Like I have only been on one side of this card, but it has been 3 times and it was the wrong side. And this card just flat ended the game. So here's the things I'm thinking. 1, I've only played sealed thus far. Getting to 10 mana in draft better be a lot harder than it is in sealed because it didn't feel that hard in sealed. Okay, so that's that. The design thing that I was thinking about is this just R&D saying, look, the game has to end sometime. Yeah, and if somebody gets up to 10 mana, here you get to win the game, right? Because it's dumb. Like the problem is I keep looking for the text with if Josu Vess leaves the battlefield, you exile all the tokens, like it's his army or their army or whatever. And it's just not. You're just losing the next turn no matter what.
Yeah. So Josu Vess is,
and by the way, regular rare.
Yeah,
Not a mythic.
I think that's the way I reverse engineer this is, hey, what about a Lich Knight that summons a Lich army and then just kind of go from there? But
okay, but 8 of these things? Like, my God.
I mean, it's an army of the damned, right? Like, so
fair enough.
Overall, I think that Josu is good on both sides of the court, as it were. Like turn 4, great play, and turn 8 or 9, depending on if you can ramp, also a great play. So I would say that the kicker cost is more relevant in this set than in most, because in most sets, this, like you said, this would be a B plus on the original stats, and still really a B plus after you consider the kicker, because it'll happen
so expensive
5% of the time. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to kick this card closer to like 15 to 20% of the time.
I think so too.
Just because there's a Grow from Ashes, there's Gilded Lotus at rare, there's the Warren, there's the Power Stone Shard, there's all those things, and just the games just naturally stall out, and you're like, oh, well, I drew Josu Vess on 8 mana, and this game's not ending soon. All right, go. So
yeah, two common mana ramp elves, and one of them makes double mana for your kicker cost. Like, come on. Also, you will note that this thing gives you a nice flexible game plan later. Because if you can slam this on turn 4, you probably just do it and get your value. But if you're up to 8 mana and you're in a stall, you're not just slamming Josu Vess. You're like, well, I'll just wait. And then in 4 or 5 turns later, you found your other 2 mana and off you go.
I think that you take all that into consideration, and Josu Vess ends up as a A minus.
Okay, I was gonna go A plus, but I'm just gonna go with A on Josu Vess. The thing is that the baseline is so high. This card's just a joke at 4 mana. It's really it dodges all the removal.
Look at it this way: your 10 mana bomb is also good in your opening hand. That's pretty nice, right?
Yeah. That's I value that highly, shall we say? And also the fact that it is such just a game ender up high. I'm going to go A on Josu Vess. Next is Kazarov Sengir Pureblood. This is 5 black for a legendary creature vampire. It's a 4/4 with flying. So 7 mana 4/4 flyer. Not a huge fan of that. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it on Kazarov. Yeah, and then you can pay 3 and a red to give have Kazarov deal 2 damage to target creature. So let's just say you're going to be saying that escalated quickly and then the first time you cast Kazarov, because you can get into combat and all of a sudden Kazarov's a 7/7, or if you get to untap and you happen to be in red, then he just starts machine gunning stuff down, and all of a sudden he's again a 7/7 or an 8/8 and ending the game. But we do have a 7 mana 4/4 here with flying, which is not nearly as good of an opening cost as, say, Josu Vess, for example.
Yeah, I think Kazarov is one of those cards that will take over some games and be the best card going on, and in some games is a card you spend 7 mana for and gets killed by like a Blood Tallow Candle or an Eviscerate or a Shivan Fire.
Shivan Fire? I mean, ouch.
So overall, I think this
also, what about if you're playing red?
If you're not playing red, the card is unplayable. Like you don't need to be like main red. Like I've played this card, I've seen it played in like black-green decks that have 1 mountain, and 1 mountain's enough. Like once you can activate this card once a turn, it is more than fine.
I mean, it does still trigger. Like you can be like, Kazarov, attack with my ground creatures, and if they do damage,
that's just not enough of a card is the problem.
Is that a dream? Okay.
Yeah, it's just 7 mana is just too much for that card. So
yeah, I agree.
I think Kazarov's fine, but I would not give it a very high grade. I think Kazarov's going to end up being like a C plus, but some decks that really need a finisher, it's gonna be where you want to be.
It's just too expensive to get a really high grade. C plus for Kazarov, Sengir Pureblood. All right, what does Lich's Mastery do?
This is a cool one. Surprisingly not mythic. It's 3 black for a legendary enchantment at rare. It has hexproof, so you can't get disenchanted. It says you can't lose the game. Says whenever you gain life, draw that many cards. Whenever you lose life, for each 1 life you lost, exile a permanent you control or a card from your hand or graveyard. So you actually losing life doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter when the card is in play, whether you're at 20 or -10. But for each damage, you're giving up a card. Either it's from anywhere. It's from in play, from your hand, or from your graveyard. It's from anywhere, but it is a card. And then when Lich's Mastery leaves the battlefield, you lose the game, and eventually you have to sacrifice this. You take enough damage, and Lich's Mastery goes down. So,
okay,
I think that Lich's Mastery, on its face, you're looking at this and you're like, okay, this isn't very good, right? You're paying 6 mana, and you're in a spot where you have to use this as a huge life gain spell, right? Have like a really thick graveyard or a lot of cards in play or in your hand. And then you also need to be using the ability of gain a life, draw a card, which turns, everyone's favorite Navigator's Compass into an Ancestral Recall. But
don't bring that up. We'll talk about that next week. Yeah.
But I think that overall, Lich's Mastery is a very interesting card. And this is one I think predict will be better than it looks, but it's going to be very hard to use. And I don't really know what a Lich's Mastery deck looks like quite yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that's standing out to me is life gain, right? Like you have to support this with life gain. Is that even true?
Yes.
I mean, that is the upside here. Like the two upsides are you can't lose the game and it turns life gain into card draw.
Yeah. So it basically turns into a pseudo life gain spell itself, because it's turning your life total into the number of cards you have available, plus the actual life gain of the card draw of every time you gain life, you draw that many cards, which is also like gaining life because it turns cards into life. So
right.
you do need life gain to make this card good, but is it worth playing like 2 Navigator's Compass and some other like kind of medium life gain in order to make this card good? I don't know the answer to that yet. My suspicion is that there are deck configurations where you'll be pretty happy with this, but I don't know. Like I said, I don't know exactly where those are at.
Yeah, this Lich's Mastery to me looks like the perfect card that, like, once I feel like I've gotten my feet in the format, I'm like going to open this and be like, okay, we're just doing this and just see what happens. But this is a classic. Like, I want people to beat me with this card before I decide to start running it, because it looks like it might be awful, right? Like there's some significant downsides here for sure, but it definitely could have a home. And it's just hard to sort out exactly what that looks like. This seems to be a build around. Like, I don't assume that you just throw this into any deck that can cast it.
Yes, it's definitely a build around. That's unquestionable. Basically, is this a build around like F or a build around B? I think it's going to hit closer to B than F. But I'm going to start this as build around C, which indicates to me that it is possible there is a reward, but most of the time you're not going to get there, so you don't start there.
Okay.
And I will be very interested in trying to see what this plays like.
Okay. I'm gonna take a strong stance here. I'm gonna say build around F. And I'm going to say it's too tricky. It's too, the setup cost is too high. The mana cost is too high, and that you don't actually end up doing it. And let's honestly
revisit this in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Next is Phyrexian Scriptures.
This one's easier.
Yeah, this one's fantastic. So 2 black for a saga. This is mythic rare. So Chapter 1, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. Chapter 2. Destroy all non-artifact creatures. And remember, the first one happens right away when you cast it. So it's like go, and by the time that's your turn again, everything's getting blown up except for ideally that one that one artifact creature you have. Now 3 is a little less exciting. Exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards, which feels like whatever, right?
That has largely been flavor text. There's a couple interactions where that matters, but for the most part, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but the first 2 are wow.
This is just one of
that
those
is raw power.
It's
definitely.
It is suspend 1 wrath, but you also get to keep your best creature. Plus, if you have other random artifacts, then you end up keeping those as well.
Yep. If you build around it, you also, of course, can set up your game plan to take advantage of Phyrexian Scriptures if you have it in your hand at any point during the developing stage. Yeah, this card just seems very raw power to me. Yeah,
so this is Phyrexian Scriptures is just probably an A+, honestly. There's just
4 mana Dune Blast.
4 mana Dune Blast is just as good as it sounds. Plus, there's also ways to rebuy that. And, you have Rona at uncommon, the blue-black legendary that lets you exile a card from a graveyard. For 7 mana, you can play her, exile Scriptures, replay Scriptures. And
nice.
That's pretty easy to do and very rewarding. You have
the Tragic Poet.
Yeah, you have Tragic Poet. You have Nature's Spiral. You have the Koilos Guardian or whatever, the 5-cost 4/4 artifact or 4/5 artifact that just bounces it.
Right.
So you play that, untap, blow up all their stuff, then you play that, bounce it, and that's already an artifact. So
oh my God. And then you just hold it in your hand until they rebuild or die. Yeah, that seems good.
So all that I think bumps it up to me. I think that you're never going to pass this card. I would give Phyrexian Scriptures an A+.
Okay. Yeah. A+ for Phyrexian Scriptures. Next is one that's a little harder to figure out. It's Rite of Bells and Lock. Yep. 2 black. This is another saga, by the way. This one's just a regular rare. First 2 chapters are the same. 2 black for this one. You get 2 0/1 black cleric creature tokens. So you end up with 4 of those.
Yep.
And then the third chapter is you get a 6/6 black demon creature token with flying trample. And at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice another creature. If you can't, this creature deals 6 damage to you. Now, the interesting part about this is that there's some cards that precede this. So for players that have been playing for a while, you may have some things. The demon doesn't get tapped. You don't have to sacrifice it, even if it does a 6 damage to you. It just hits you for 6, but you can still just clock your opponent with it.
You eat something if you have something to eat, but it is not it is not going to go away if it doesn't have food.
And it comes with a lot of food, 4/01 tokens to just sacrifice to it in addition to whatever else you've cast. So to me, Rite of Bells and Lock is quite strong, though it does receive a slight ding because there does seem to be an inordinate amount of bounce in this format that is proven to be quite strong. And that means that the demon being a token makes it a lot more fragile.
Yeah, I mean,
but still, I would still just play the dang thing, though.
Yeah, when you get Blink of an Eye or Academy Journey Mage, it doesn't feel great.
Time of Ice hits it too.
I will say that this card is excellent because it gives you so much fodder that the drawback on the demon seems largely irrelevant. This is basically like, again, a suspended 6/6 trampler with lots of chump blockers for their other ground creatures too. And yeah, some of the time you're going to run out of ways to feed it stuff, but often the opponent is going to take a lot of damage on the way. And there's not even a good pacifism, is there? Because Deep Freeze and Seal Away either exile or take away the abilities. So you're not even in a spot where you can't, you have to feed it something every turn.
No. And again, I mentioned the bounce thing just to say it will happen a little more often. It doesn't mean that you don't play cards like it's not like, so you don't play your 4-mana 6/6 flying demon. No, you do. You still play the thing. It's just don't be too crushed.
There's some thought to sideboarding this out. If you see like 2 Blink of an Eyes and 2 Academy Journey or something like that. But for the most part, I would just play Rite of Bells and Lock and it'll be very good. I would give this card an A-.
Yeah, I do too. A- for Rite of Bells and Lock. I also like that it stabilizes you a little and makes sure you can survive. Next is Torgar, Famine Incarnate. And this is pretty expensive. It's 6 black for a 7/6 legendary creature avatar at rare. But it's got a clause. As an additional cost to cast it, you can sacrifice any number of creatures and the spell, and Torgar costs 2 less to cast for each creature sacrificed this way. So even just sacrificing 2 random creatures, just, a Saproling and this guy that had a pacifism or whatever, it's 4 mana, right? I mean, you can get that down quite quickly. And if you do, so this is what happens. So he's a 7/6. When he enters the battlefield, up to 1 target player's life total becomes half of their starting life total rounded down. And that sounds weird because there are other formats besides, the competitive ones that we talk about here. But for our purposes, your life, yours, and by the way, it can be you or your opponent's, becomes 10.
Yeah, so you can bring them down to 10 or you up to 10. You can't if they have hexproof, again, as I learned. But overall, this card is quite good. It's
solid. Yeah, I had this in one of my decks.
Yeah, it's expensive, but it really does the thing that you want it to do, which is, come into play for 4 to 6 mana is usually what it ends up costing, and deal 10 to your opponent if you play it early, and potentially gain you a couple life. Also, later in the game, you can just cast it. There's no rule against that. So,
yep, totally.
I think this card's going to end up being like not like a really high pick, but like a mid to high pick. This is like a better Colossal Dreadmaw for decks with tokens. But yeah, it's not.
And its stats are fine. It's a 7/6 with no extra abilities. It's good. The neat thing that you can do is put out a couple of sapperlings and then sack them and put a 7/6 on the battlefield in a mode that says, okay, you're at 10. Like you were at 20, now you're at 10. And you have to kill this. Like this is going to trump everything on the battlefield. Like if you just go turn to, what is it called? Sapperling migration. Yep. Just the one that makes two saps with, and then turn 4, you just
or just turn 3 sap herd, not shepherd. And then
sap herd. And totally.
You can turn 4 that as well.
And I think there's a good argument for just going all in with this. Like it feels a little like, I don't want a 2-for-1 myself, but a 7/6 is like, it needs a very specific answer, and they're at 10. Like they need to come up with it very quickly. So I like Torgar. I think he's actually pretty strong, and I give Torgar like I hesitate between B and B plus, but I'll go B plus. I think Torgar's good.
I think B minus. I think Torgar is going to be worse than all the common rule spells. Like I don't think you're going to take Torgar over Eviscerate. So
that's true. I would take Eviscerate over Torgar at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. B minus for Torgar. You got me. Last black card is called Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. And I have to do this again, but this is a legendary sorcery. So here's what it does, because it's fantastic. 4 and a black. You may, put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Exile Yawgmoth's Vile Offering.
So
boom.
Not quite mind control, because you have to bring something back before you kill something. You can't kill the same thing that you bring back, but or bring back the same thing that you're going to kill. But if you cast this card, you're going to win the game most of the time.
Definitely.
Like it is a huge swing, and the requirement of having a legend, it's a real one. And this one's cheap enough at 5 instead of like 6 for the Temporal Sundering that I think you can get there a decent amount of the time. I would give this build around like probably A minus, because it's
I would just say
okay. You build around A for Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. If you can get this off, it is as vile as it promises.
Yeah, I had this in my pool and I couldn't. I had two playable legendaries. I had to leave it in the board. I just
not quite good.
It sucks. All right, so we got through the demons and the liches, and now it's time to move on to red. Our first red card is called the First Eruption, and this is kind of cool. I actually was talking to former Limited Resources co-host and original Limited Resources co-host Ryan Spain. He actually submitted the early design for this. So this is a card that Ryan designed, and it actually made it into print. So pretty cool. And it's a neat one too, very flavorful and very Ryan-esque. It's top down. It's called, I mentioned, it's called the First Eruption. It's 2 and a red for Saga. It's rare. So chapter 1, the First Eruption deals 1 damage to each creature without flying. So there's your pre-eruption tremors. Chapter 2, add red, boom. And then chapter 3, that's like the lava coming out. And then chapter 3 is sacrifice a mountain. If you do, the First Eruption deals 3 damage to each creature, and you can figure out what that's trying to represent. So kind of cool. How good is this card, though?
I don't think it's very good.
I don't think so either.
So I think the conceit here is you go like, play this, maybe kill one of their X1s or a Sapperling. Next turn, you get 2 red, you can play your 6-drop, and then you can sack a mountain, but you already played your expensive card, and then the 3 damage doesn't kill whatever you played with the red mana. The problem is the first and the third modes both kind of punish small creatures, but I don't think this format's going to always be about that. Sometimes it will be. And then adding 2 red is just a little situational. Yeah, sure, sometimes you have a 6-drop and you play it, it's great. Sometimes you just have creatures that will die to the First Eruption, and red is not high on 4 toughness creatures, so...
Right.
This looks like a D to me, and I think, or it's like a sideboard B.
Sideboard B is what I was going to say, because if I'm playing against Sapperling deck or something like that, I'll bring this thing in.
It's great, but I think a lot of deck configurations, it's just not going to be that good.
Yeah, cool design though, Ryan. Next one is the triple colored cost for red. It's called Goblin Chain Whirler. It's triple red for a 3/3 Goblin Warrior at rare. It's got first strike, and when it enters a battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control.
So this is the one I mentioned earlier, where it falls off a lot in the late game. Where the pinging for 1 will still punish Sapperlings or soldier tokens or what have you, but a 3/3 first strike, so much of the power is playing it on turn 3 or 4 and just dominating the board for a few turns. A 3/3 first strike, when people are rolling out their 4/4s and 5/5s and 6/6s or 7/6 Primordial Worms, just doesn't really do it for me. So this is a build around, but it's like a build around C, where if you're like edging towards really heavy red, sure, the card is great. you'll play it. But I'm not taking this one early. It's like a Dread Shade. I'm not going to take this early and move into near mono red because of Goblin Chain Whirler.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Goblin Chain Whirler wants to be in mono red effectively. I mean, that's where it's awesome. So build around B.
I would say build around C. It's
C.
Yeah. It's just not.
I mean, if you cast it, yeah, I guess it's still just too hard to, like, in limited, it's just not realistic to have it on turn 3. Okay. Next is Haphazard Bombardment. This one's a little weird. It's 5 and a red for an enchantment at rare. It says when it enters the battlefield, choose 4 non-enchantment permanents you don't control and put an aim counter on each of them. Okay. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more permanents you don't control have an aim counter on them, destroy one of those permanents at random.
So basically, you pick 4 of your opponent's permanents, and you can pick lands, by the way. And then this over time destroys all but one of them.
Yes.
This card's good.
And at random.
It is random, but this card is good. I think that a lot of the times you're going to cast this and pick 2 to 3 creatures and like 1 to 2 lands because they're frequently not going to have 4 creatures in play. But this kills 3 of the 4 things you select. And even though it's random and sometimes you're not going to hit their 4/4 flyer the first time, each successive turn it becomes more likely you do so. And it's still like in most boards, this is just going to have I think an effect that's worth 6 mana. It's also really powerful if you bounce and replay this or anything like that because it stacks nicely where they end up, the second one kills the full 4 permanents because it still looks at the 1 aim counter from before. So
the aim counter stays. Oh, that's interesting.
So
the other thing to note here about the timing is that it does trigger at the beginning of your end step. Yeah. So you're getting that trigger right away. It's not the kind of thing where it's like on your upkeep and you're just, you spent 6 mana.
If this was on your upkeep, this card I think would be much, much, much worse. But as is, I like this card. I think I would give Haphazard Bombardment a B. I think if you're playing red, you're just going to play this card.
I think so too. Also, I think this is a type of card that would really shine in sealed and could be the type of card you might not want in some matchups in the draft. Next is our first Planeswalker. It's Jaya Ballard. And Jaya is 2 red. So very tricky mana cost there. For legendary Planeswalker Jaya at Mythic, she comes down with 5 loyalty. And she's not that great, to be honest. +1, add triple red. Spend this mana only to cast instant or sorcery spells. So that's not super useful. Another +1, which is kind of cool. She has 2 +1s, but discard up to 3 cards, then draw that many cards. That can help you find your bombs or your important stuff, sure. And then -8 is the ultimate. You get an emblem with you may cast instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard. If a card cast this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. It gives an emblem that says, you have like perma flashback on all your instants and sorcery. So this is clearly a nod to some type of spells based deck that probably doesn't really exist much in limited. So the question is, are we happy enough with that middle +1 ability of +1 discard up to 3 cards, then draw that many cards?
Yeah, I'm medium on it. I think that the triple red casting cost really scares me away from Jaya because she's going to be good on boards where you can protect her or she's not getting directly attacked. And then she churns through your deck very quickly. But it's a 5 mana spell, does not help protect herself whatsoever with them, except for the niche case of +1 play a sorcery to protect myself right away, like a removal spell. And at triple red just means that some of the games, it's like, this would be a perfect turn 5 Jaya, except I have 2 mountains and 3 islands. Yeah. So I am pretty low on Jaya. I think she's like a C-. If you can cast her, she's fine, but it's just a hard casting cost and not a huge payoff.
Yeah, I was going to say D for Jaya Ballard. I mean, maybe I'm being too hard on her because Planeswalkers have such a high bar, but this card is just like, I don't really want this card. Like,
I would much prefer the Jaya themed card we're going to get to next.
Her Immolating Inferno. Let's talk about that one. So this one is insane. It's a regular rare rather than mythic, but it's red X for a legendary sorcery. Jaya's Immolating Inferno deals X damage to up to 3 targets.
So this is like Yawgmoth's Bile Offering. Build her on A. If you can get there on the Inferno, it's obscene. You're going to pay 6 or 7 mana and you're going to kill 3 of their creatures or nug them for 5 and kill 2 creatures. That's just absurd. So
yeah, it's just stupid. Yeah. So build around A for Jaya's Immolating Inferno. Just remember, legendary sorcery.
Red got a nice stretch to close out here. We're going to start with Siege Gang Commander, so a reprint, 3 red for a 2/2 goblin at rare. When it enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 goblins. And you can pay 1 and a red and sack a goblin for Siege Gang to deal 2 to any target. So Siege Gang's 5
That's
mana
so
for
dumb.
5 power and toughness, split up among 4 bodies, and then also comes with a bunch of shocks if you get to untap.
Yeah. I thought I was really excited about all these throwbacks, but every time I've played against them, I'm just like groan testing. I'm like, oh no.
Siege Gang is just a flat A. There's just no deck that would not want Siege
Yep.
Gang. And if you ever even like raised at it, it's just obscene. But just casting it's already good enough. It's just too many bodies and it just throws damage around. So it's not even like vulnerable to flyers. You untap and start killing off all their like, 3/2 or even 4/4 flyers.
Yeah. I'm actually going to go A+ on Siege Gang because it so stabilizes your board the turn you cast it.
And there's synergy
it is an obscene magic card.
with cards like Soul Salvage. So yeah, I'll go A+ on Siege Gang Commander.
Yep. Next is Squee the Immortal. So Squee, back again, 1 red for a 2/1 legendary goblin at rare. You may cast Squee the Immortal from your graveyard or from exile.
Good combo, Siege Gang Commander. Squee is a card I would play in all my red decks. Makes your sacrifice stuff better. Also just a 3-mana 2/1 that never dies. Like your opponent's never going to want to trade for it, and you could even block something big later in the game every turn. Can't even get rid of him by exile. You just can't get rid of him. So
no, you just can't get rid of Squee. Also sets up your Jaya's Immolating Inferno beautifully.
Yeah, an unkillable legendary creature is pretty nice. You also get a lot of
it's a real thing.
A lot of historic triggers by just chumping with Squee and recasting him. So I think Squee's going to be a B.
I think so too. It's really weird, but like Squeeze the ultimate double blocker, just like throw him in there, he'll be back. Yeah. I actually like Squee the Immortal way more than I thought. I thought it was cute on first read. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. I think I just like it. I'm going to go B as well. Next is Two-Headed Giant, which is 2 red for a 4/4 giant warrior at rare. Whenever Two-Headed Giant attacks, flip 2 coins. This is getting a little involved. If both coins come up heads, Two-Headed Giant gets double strike until end of turn. If they come up tails, Two-Headed Giant gets menace until end of turn. And of course, if they're
one head, one tails.
If they're head and tails, then you get nothing until end of turn.
So a third of the time you get 2 heads, a third of the time you get a mix, and a third of the time you get 2 tails, right? Is that how it works?
I don't think that's how it works.
No,
I think it's a quarter of the time, but yeah. But
yes, it's
still
you can make the tails in 2 different configurations.
Right. We call those combos in poker. But
so this is half the time.
This card's fine, though.
Yeah, half the time it is double strike, and that's amazing. Half the time, quarter of the time it is menace, and it's pretty good. And then half the time it's just a 4/4 for 4, also quite good.
Yeah.
So I think Two-Headed Giant's a B+.
Me too. I just think it's. I don't love all the coin flippy stuff, but it's just a good card. Like it's a 4/4 for 4, and then it has upside. So I dig it. Last one I should say is Varric's Bladewing, a simple card but very powerful as well. 2 red for a legendary dragon at Mythic rare. It's a 4/4 with flying, but it has kicker for 3. So now we're up to 7 mana. And if it's kicked, you create Karok's Bladewing, another legendary 4/4 red dragon. So basically it's buy one, get one free, right? It's like you can pay 4 mana for a 4/4 flyer, if that makes sense. Or if you can wait a turn or two, you can kick it and get 2 of them.
So this is like Josu Vest, but even better, because I'd rather have a 4/4 flying than a 4/5 menace. And the kicker's only 3 more than the original cost. So,
and you get 2. It's just dumb. I mean, this is not a fancy card, but it's just raw power pushed. It's just really strong.
Oh yeah. So I would slam Varric's Bladewing. I think this also gets an A+. Red just has some pretty nice rares, and
really nice. Yeah. Siege Gang, Varric's, Jaya's Immolating Inferno if you can cast it. So, the rest are fine. Yeah, the bombardment's just okay, but
still two A pluses is a good haul. So Varric's Bladewing is one of the cards you're hoping to open. That leads us to green, and the first card, not an A+. Kamal's Druidic Vow. This is X green for a legendary sorcery at rare. It says, look at the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of land and or legendary permanents with converted mana cost X or less from among them on the battlefield. The rest go to your graveyard. When I first read this, I thought this was like a Genesis wave, but you had to have a legendary creature to cast it. And I was like, okay, yeah, this could be kind of cool. It only hits legendary permanents. This is a straight up F. Like, you should just never put this card in your deck. You just won't have enough legendary permanents in your deck to justify it, and you need one to cast it to begin with. I'm completely not in for Kamal's Druidic Vow.
You're not taking the vow? Right. Okay. By the way, I'm so screwed here, Louise. This next card is called Marwyn the Nurturer, but I can't read it as anything other than Marvin.
Oh, good luck.
It's just Marvin the Nurturer. And I'm just like, I need to get that out of my head. Like maybe it's German, like the W's pronounce that. Anyway, Marwyn the Nurturer is a 2 and a green for a 1/1 legendary elf druid at rare. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Marwyn the Nurturer. And then she taps to add an amount of green mana equal to her power.
There's not a ton of elves. There's one good
here?
common. There was 2 good common elves. There's Llanowar Elf and Llanowar Envoy. Then there's a bad common elf, the 1/3 that puts lands into play that you generally don't want to put in your deck. So you're going to have a deck with like 2 elves some of the time alongside Marwyn, and that probably makes her playable in a deck that really wants to hit 5 or 6 mana because she's already just a ramp spell by herself.
Yeah.
You could equip a short sword to her and really go big if you wanted to.
Sure.
I think Marwyn the Nurturer,
or even the jousting thing or whatever. Yeah.
She's playable but not exciting. I would give her just a C, and not a builder run, just a straight up C, where she'll make the cut in some of your green decks and won't in others, but definitely not worth striving for because there's just not enough elves to really go down that road.
Right. I mean, we're basically just talking about a 3 mana elf.
Yeah.
That also satisfies legendary
with minor
features.
upside. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next is called The Mending of Dominaria, and it is a saga 3 green. Chapters 1 and 2 are the same, and they say put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Of note, it doesn't have to be of those 2 cards, just any creature card in your graveyard. So you pay 5 mana. You're probably getting a creature back no matter what, and you even have a chance to spike something really good. And then that happens again. And then chapter 3 is return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, then shuffle your graveyard into your library.
Basically, this is you're playing this as a slightly more involved soul salvage because you're just playing it for the first 2 chapters. But getting a land or 2 doesn't hurt either. I've been reasonably impressed by this card. The milling yourself for 2 is a really big part of it. Without that, I think I would not like this card very much at all. But with that part being part of it, you end up fueling itself, or you could even sometimes play this without a creature or in your graveyard if you really have nothing else to do.
I see. If you have nothing else, you can just run it out and at least hope to hit.
Yeah. And overall, I think this card will do enough that you're going to be happy with it in any creature-based deck or any heavy creature deck. So I would give Mending of Dominaria like probably a C+.
I was going to go C. It's clunky as heck. I mean, that's a slow card.
It doesn't quite get to,
but it's a lot of value.
It doesn't quite get to the B range, but I think it's good.
One other rules question: does it shuffle itself in?
It does not. The saga triggers, the ability happens, and this goes to the graveyard, and you sacrifice it afterwards.
Okay, just making sure. Next is Multani Yavamaya's Avatar. And Multani's a mythic legendary elemental avatar. 4 green for a 0/0 with reach and trample. But of course, there's more. Multani gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land card in your graveyard. And you can pay 1 and a green and return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand to return Multani from your graveyard to your hand. It's a lot of beef, and it has reach and trample.
Multani is significantly better than just like a big dork because, first of all, Multani is going to be an 8/8 some of the time.
Yep.
Second, virtually unkillable, and when it comes to the late game, that becomes even more the case. Because if you kill Multani on turn 6, if your opponent plays it, you kill on turn 6. They can't return it and play it in the same turn on turn 7, which does limit how good it is by a decent amount. But then once it gets later than that, it's just like, well, you eviscerated it. Okay, I'm going to bring it back and replay it, and it's just a 10/10 still. And it has reach, so it protects you from powers.
Yeah, that seems insane. And it's also just a fantastic finisher because it has trample.
Yeah, the reach and the trample are both pretty important for this card. So I think Multani Yavamaya's Avatar is going to end up being like a B+. It's just really big and threatening. The fact that it's resilient to removal and stops flyers really shores up some of the weaknesses you see of these like big green creatures. So I think add those 2 things together and it gets to B+ for me.
Okay, I'll go say A- for Multani. I like the inevitability that card gives you, and it's just huge. All right, we've got the triple green rare. It's called Steel Leaf Champion. Steel Leaf Champion's an elf knight. You want beef? 5/4. So a 3 mana 5/4 that can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less.
This card's solid.
Boy, oh boy. That's some beef.
It's not as good as it looks because, again, unlike Tempest Djinn or Benalish Marshal, which we'll get to, this doesn't scale all as well at like turn 6. Like turn 6 is this isn't much better than Colossal Dreadmaw. And if you have to wait that long to cast it, you're not going to be super happy about it. That said, it is worth building to, the 10 or 11 forest deck. And if you can combo Llanowar Elves in this, then you're just going to win the game very easily.
Yeah, if you get because you can turn 2 this even in limited, you need 2 forests and a Llanowar Elves with it. It's not going to happen every time, but boy, 5/4 on turn 2 go.
Yeah,
that's like standard playable, right? I mean, that's a super powerful start.
Yeah, that is just game at that point. And I think that green is one of the colors that lends itself to being a heavy color, one of your main colors. So
definitely,
I'm in for Steelleaf Champion. I would give it a build around B.
Me too. I think this is one of the better ones because of the elves. There's also the I can't remember the name, but the O2, the one in a green O2 that helps cast it too, that you were going to play in your deck anyway, and that you can help fill in the gap on an extra green mana source. Next card is called Sylvan Awakening. It's 2 and a green for a sorcery. It's rare. It says, until your next turn, all lands you control become 2/2 elemental creatures with reach, indestructible, and haste. They're still lands.
This card's pretty funny. The fact that they have reach means that so you could use this as a super plummet, right? Like they attack you with like 2 flyers and you're just like, bam, Sylvan Awakening, block both your flyers with all my lands. But
it's a sorcery though. Like how are you going to do that?
Never mind. I'm so much less excited by this.
Yeah, me too.
I guess it's just a way to kill them. If you have 8,
it's just a finisher.
If you have 8 mana out, this deals 10. Though they can't block the lands if they want. It's not like they're unblockable. If you have 12 mana out, this is pretty effective. I don't think this card's very good. I think it's like a D.
Me neither. Me too. And of course, the math that Luis is doing is counting for the fact that you have to tap 3 your lands so that those 3 don't.
3 lands, things would be dramatically different. I think that there are some matchups where this card would be a really good finisher, but for the most part, you're not going to want this card in your deck. I
agree. It's a temporary effect, and your opponent knows it's there. So, yeah, I like D for Sylvan Awakening. Next green rare is called Territorial Allosaurus. Oh, no, not another dinosaur. What does this guy do?
2 green for a 5/5 dinosaur at rare. Has kicker of 2 and a green. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it fights another creature. So 4 mana 5/5, great. 7 mana 5/5 that fights a creature, even better. Well, having the option,
that is fantastic.
I guess if I had to pick one of those 2, I'd just put the 4 mana 5/5 in my deck. But this card is great in either half. One note of caution: if you kick this, it has to fight something. So imagine you had a 2/2 and they had a 2/2, and you played this with kicker. While it's on the stack, they can bounce their own creature, and then this has to fight your other creature. It does not have a choice about that. So that's worth noting, but it's not a huge issue with the card or anything like that.
No, card's fantastic. Also in green, meaning that your ability to get to that kicker is way easier. You have that elf I keep talking about, and you also have the, what is it called? Grow from the Ashes or whatever? Yep,
Grow from Ashes is a card I think we underrated. I already can tell that.
Oh, I'm trying to hold. I feel the same way. We'll talk about this next week, but also sealed. Like I need to get some drafts in, but I wanted as many of those as I could get in sealed. I'll tell you that. I like Allosaurus a lot. I think it's an A-.
Oh, I was going to say it's either an A or an A+, but I would just give it an A. I think Territorial Allosaurus just gets a solid A.
I'll meet you at A for Territorial, A for Allosaurus. Next and last for green is a reprint. It's Verdant Force, 5 green for a 7/7 elemental. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you get a Sapperling.
This card's great. This is a format where I think it's well suited for Verdant Force. I think, Grow from the Ashes is a way to get to cast this. Gilded Lotus, Power Stone Shard. These are all cards that I think you're going to play in varying amounts and will help you cast Verdant Force, which will close out a lot of games. So I am pretty happy with Verdant Force. It's a build around. An 8 mana card almost by definition is, because you just can't play 8 mana cards, trivially. But I think it's a build around B+. Like I'm not unhappy taking Verdant Force if I have like if I started a draft with like Llanowar Elves and a Skittering Surveyor. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take Verdant Force third, and this will be the way
Definitely.
I'm closing out the game.
Yeah, it's a great finisher. And again, each upkeep. So even the turn you play it, you already have 2 blockers before their first combat step. So build around B+ for Verdant Force. Just make sure you support it with some mana ramp and don't just jam it into every green deck.
So for the
that brings us
the multicolor cards, would it be faster just to give them?
We're going to white. We're going to white.
Oh, I was going to say, okay. Because I was going to say, once you get to multicolor, it might be faster just to give them all A's and move on.
You want to skip them and just say they're all A? We'll go into a little more detail.
No,
Let's go with white first. White first is Benalis Marshall. That's me. White. So this is your triple white card. Real simple card. It's a 3/3 knight that gives other creatures you control +1/+1. It's an anthem on legs.
Yeah, Benalis Marshall is great. Much better than the name would imply. And it's one of the cards.
What do you got against Benalia?
Yeah, Benalia. It's one of the cards that is worth casting on turn 6 of this type. And I would play Benalis Marshall in the vast majority of my white decks, while also looking to maximize my planes count, of course, if I got it early. So this is a build around B+. It's a card I'm happy to play, happy to take, happy to try to accommodate. It's just really powerful. Also, a knight. Knights matter some of the time.
Yep, they do. So build around B+ for Benalis Marshall. Make sure that you're supporting it as much as possible. Next is Daring Archaeologist. I kind of had a chance to play this a bunch of times. It's a 3 and a white for a rare 3/3 Human Artificer. When it enters a battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, which sounds kind of cool, but it's also pretty difficult to get artifacts in the graveyard, so it's not that great. But it also has an extra ability. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you get a +1/+1 counter on Daring Archaeologist.
That part is pretty cool. Overall, this is not a bomb rare, but it is a card that you're going to be happy with in most white decks. There are a lot of like random historic triggers and reasons to want historic in white. So I would give Daring Archaeologist like a B-, I think.
B-. It's a B-. Yeah. This is the type of card that I wanted to see these type of payoffs at the uncommon slot, basically like getting counters on my creatures rather than like temporary pumps. This is a fine historic payoff. Like this is a good card. But it's not super exciting. It's not a bomb. Oh boy. This next one, man, a lot of stories around Evra Halcyon Witness so far. This is a weird and cool card. I played against it in my first event, didn't understand it, and then did later. 4 white. For a 4/4 legendary creature, avatar at rare, with lifelink. So 6 mana, 4/4 lifelink. Before we talk about the ability, where are you at on that, Luis?
That's like
a little undersized, but lifelink's a big game.
That's like a C+.
Yeah. So here's the ability that Evra has. Pay 4 mana, exchange your life total with Evra Halcyon Witness's power.
So I'm sure Woody already told you about casting Befuddle on...
Oh, I got a slew of text messages from both Woody and Adam, who, by the way, is who he was playing against. Like our friend Adam, they were in a 4,000 player Magic Online, whatever, and they got paired up. And Adam ships with Evra, gets befuddled, and goes, "Okay, I guess I lose." Yeah. So pretty good. Basically,
what will happen is you'll switch life totals with Evra, and first of all, if the opponent can't block, you frequently just kill them. Mostly what will happen is you're going to try to like get 2 hits in with Evra to end up putting yourself up a bunch of life, though that is a little difficult to end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the card is good. It's weird. It is definitely a very weird card. It does some strange things, but I think on balance it's good and it's really threatening. So I think that adding those things together make me want to play the card.
Me too. Here's the play pattern with it. You play it, you can't attack into it because it's 4/4 lifelink. So anything smaller than that just doesn't apply. Then they untap and they're at 16 or whatever they're at. And they're like, attack you with this thing. And you're like, okay, I have to put 2 creatures or at least something with 4 power on it because its toughness doesn't change, only its power. And then they go switch, right? So now their life total's 4 and this thing's 16 power. And then you trade off your 2 small creatures for Evra and they're at 20.
Yeah.
And that happens most of the time. But like you said, if left unchecked, if it can get through, if you can give it flying for a turn or any type of evasion, the game's just over. And if they don't have good blocks for it, the game's just over. So there's a lot to be said with this. cards that jump to mind when I saw it, though I haven't actually seen this happen, are the like +1/+0 on first strike, like game, right? Like, because you just have to block it. You just don't have a choice. It's one of those cards that just says, okay, fine, I'll put my 2 or 3 creatures in front and just hope that this all works out the way I want it to. Good card. It's solid.
Yeah, it's weak against bounce and instant speed interaction, but still a good card overall. I would give Evra like a B-.
Yeah, I was going to give Evra a B. I think it's a good card. It's powerful, whatever. So B for Evra. Next is a card I'm not going to give a B. Fall of the Thran. This is a saga that is 5 and a white. Chapter 1, destroy all lands.
All right.
And then chapters 2 and 3 are each player returns 2 land cards from their graveyard to the battlefield. So it's like blow up everything and then like I'll let you have a little bit back, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really get
I've opened this and just didn't play it.
No, I didn't play it either. I don't really get what this card's trying to do, because this is the kind of card where you always use this comparison, right? Where if you're winning and you cast this, you'll frequently win the game, right? Because they'll play nothing on their next turn. Like you have a 4/4 and a 3/3, they have nothing in play. You're like, blow up all your lands, go. But when you're winning and you cast a 6-mana spell, usually that means you're going to continue winning. Like how often would a Colossal Dreadmaw win you the game in that spot?
Yeah. Show me the 6-mana spell that we all deem as playable that doesn't just win you the game.
Whereas when you're behind, this card is very bad. Like you just can't cast this card when you're behind.
Yep.
And it doesn't even kill their lands forever, so it's not even like it locks them out if you have like just a 3/3 out, right? If you just had like had like a 3/3 out where you're like, you're ahead but not winning, but you're like blow up all lands, you could steal some games, but that's just not how this works. So I think Fall of the Thran is an F. I just don't think it's playable.
It's an F. It's just an F. Yeah, I left it in my board and I was happy with it there. Next card's really cool. It's called History of Benalia. It's a mythic saga. It's 1 white, and the first 2 chapters are the same. You get a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. So good, right? I mean, look, it feels like, oh, it's a mythic, it's going to do insane stuff. It actually doesn't. It's just quite powerful. Chapter 3 is knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. It's a simple card. It spits out 2 knights and then it pumps them for a turn. But boy, for 3 mana, it's hard to do much better than
this. Was the only card I won games with at the pre-release. I mulled a 4 and just played this on turn 3 and still won.
Really? Oh, man.
History of Benalia is an A. It falls off a little in the late game because sometimes 2/2/2s just don't do that much. But then they get to a turn of attacking as 4/3s, and it combines with all the other knights that you randomly have. And then if you play this on turn 3, you're just going to win almost every time. So no setup cost, nothing. Just tap 3 mana and get a really huge advantage. So History of Benalia, pretty easy A.
Agreed. Good card, solid, nothing fancy. This next card, it's on my short list for best cards in the set. It's called Lyra Dawnbringer. Maybe Lyra. Anyway, 3 white for a 5/5 legendary creature angel that's a mythic rare. And I'm going to tell you all you need to know. Flying, first strike, lifelink.
Yes, that is all you need to know. It also has the ability, your other angels have +1/+1 on lifelink. I faced down this plus.
She's about as relevant as flavor to
about half a turn before I conceded.
Yes,
Lyra Dawnbringer's an A+. There's just no way around it, and just
I think if I had to vote right now,
she would still be an A.
Yeah, totally. The Lyra Dawnbringer A+, fantastic card. If I had to vote right now, I'd say best card in the set. That's of course without me having played with all the cards yet. I have, however,
you haven't cast in Bolus's Clutches yet?
No, I have not. Next one is called Shalai, Voice of Plenty. I really like this one too. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4 flying angel. She's a legend. She's also rare. You, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control have hexproof. Pretty cool. Nice little bonus. And this is interesting. You can pay 4 green. So this is a little bit much, but it is another color and 6 mana. But if you do, you get a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
She does not need that ability to be a bomb. But that is what really pushes her over the edge. I think she would have been a solid A- without that. Just 4 mana, 3/4 flyer with a hexproof ability, which generally won't do much. I got very tricked by it, but generally it won't do much because they'll just aim their first removal spell at her. But adding the 6 mana to put a counter on your team ability means that she's just a solid A. I don't have her an A+, but I think she's a solid A.
I do too. The basement is fantastic and the ceiling is extremely high. The card also to keep in mind, if you're lucky or if it pans out is Gilded Lotus. Like that is a way that you can activate Shalai without actually being in green. And it's a card that you'll probably want to play anyway. So yeah, I like A for Shalai, Voice of Plenty. A couple more white cards. First one is Teshar, Ancestors Apostle, which is 3 and a white for a legendary creature bird cleric. Love that. It's a rare 2/2 flyer. 4 mana 2/2 flyer. What's the ability? Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Very good ability. And what you're going to want to do with Teshar is trade off a creature and then play Teshar plus like a short sword on turn 5. Or
I see.
Or
to get
Teshar
that value
plus a Blood Tallow Candle or what have you. And you'll end up in a spot where you just immediately get a card out of it. And then even if your opponent kills Teshar, you're still up a card. And that was a good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Teshar quite a bit. I mean, the 4 mana 2/2 flying is kind of shrug worthy, but the value engine that you can get, even just getting it triggered once, is pretty strong.
Not a build around either.
B minus, C plus. Yeah, no. You can just incidentally.
That would give Teshar a flat B. I mean, there's some decks where it's not going to be your best card, but I think Teshar is still a B.
Okay, B for Teshar, Ancestors Apostle. And of course, we have a legendary sorcery for white. This is Urza's Ruinous Blast. This is 4 and a white for a legendary sorcery. Exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary.
I'm actually not that high on Urza's Ruinous Blast.
Me neither. I saw it played and I was like, that wasn't very good.
Because, yeah, if it was just exile all non-land permanents besides the one legendary used to cast this or something, that'd be great. But the fact that it doesn't kill what is going to be their best permanent means that you're playing this card, and what are you getting out of it? You're not really getting that much out of it. So, like, there's some board positions where this is going to be great, right? There's some you're going to play this, and you're going to exile 5 other things. But you need to have a creature in play that is a legend and be behind, and them not to have a great legend. So I think Urza's Ruinous Blast is either like a build around like D or a sideboard card, but you also still need the build around part. I'm not super high on this card.
Wow, is this our first build around sideboard?
It is a funny place to be.
That probably makes it kind of bad. Yeah, I like it in the D range, whichever one of those categories you want to put it in. And by the way, I saw the perfect example of this. My friend Charles Wong was playing. He had Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp out and was ahead on damage, and his opponent had Yargle and went Urza's Ruinous Blast. And yeah, it killed 3 of Charles's other things and a couple of his opponents, but he's like, okay, 5. And, it's like Yargle couldn't get the job done. And that was it. It was like, all right. And then remember, that's with all that setup cost, of getting the legendary sorcerers. Forget it. Yeah, I'm off of Urza's Ruinous Blast. I just don't think it's that great. Okay, so gold cards. You like these gold cards, huh?
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Ariel, Knight of Windgrace. This is a 2 black white for a 4/4 legendary creature, human knight at rare. She's got Vigilance and has 2 activated abilities. One of them, 2 and a white, tap, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with Vigilance. So just spits out one of those knights. That's great. And remember, Ariel has Vigilance as well, so you can attack and then still do that. And then also black, tap, and tap X untapped knight you control to destroy target creature with power X or less.
Yeah, Ariel is pretty obscene. She's 4 mana 4/4 Vigilance that pumps out other knights and eventually starts to destroy things. I would give Ariel an A. Yeah, just pretty unqualified
I just think she's an A. Yep. Next is a card that I actually got to cast today in a sealed I did against Adam, just a live one. Daragaz Reincarnated. This is 4 black, red, green, so 7 mana for a 7/7 legendary dragon at Mythic with flying, trample, and haste.
Yep.
And very annoying. Yep. If Daragaz Reincarnated would die, instead exile it with 3 egg counters on it at the beginning of your upkeep. If Daragaz is exiled with an egg counter on it, remove an egg counter from it. Then if Daragaz has no egg counters on it, return it to the battlefield.
So basically 7/7, flying, trample, haste, and then suspend 3 every time you kill it and it comes back. So
yep.
Pretty hard to argue against Daragaz. I think that it's worth splashing. Also, 7 mana cards that have 1 of 3 different types aren't that hard to splash. If you're any 2 of these colors, it's not too difficult to imagine just playing Daragaz. And
Also, one of the colors being green helps here, the little bit of mana ramp.
Yeah, the payoff is definitely here. So I've been very impressed with Daragaz. I think Daragaz gets an A. I think that you're going to want to.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's worth taking early. Like if you see Daragaz A, pick one, pack one. I think it's fine to take. I also think if you have like a Shivan Fire or an Eviscerate or a Llanowar or any of the cards that in any of those colors, you could just end up taking it as well.
Yeah, the raw power's here. That's the bottom line with Daragaz. Sure, Daragaz is hard to cast, but the raw power's there. Next is Grand Warlord Raha. What does Radha do?
He's 2 red-green for a 3/4 legendary elf warrior at rare. She has haste, and she says whenever one or more of your creatures attack, add that much mana in any combination of red and green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So basically what Radha does is she's a 4-mana 3/4 haste, and then she gives you a couple mana the turn she comes out, and you can maybe play something else. And then if she survives, next turn you get a ton of mana, and you can just play something. Yep. Which I died to a kicked, whatever the 2 and a red Fan the Flames card is. The 2 and a red deal 10 if you pay the 9 kicker. And I died very badly to that card with enabled by Radha on like turn 6. Also, sometimes you're just going to play like a 2-drop, a 3-drop, then play Radha, attack, and play another 3-drop, and your opponent's going to be dead. So
yep. And because the haste on Radha is really nasty. So I like this card a lot. I think this is a cool design and a solid card that isn't like broken or whatever. And I would go probably A- for Grand Warlord Radha.
I like A-. Yeah. I think that she does enough work that you're going to be happy with her. And she's worth taking a gold card first.
We didn't really love the historic payoffs at the lower rarities, but this one I can get behind. This is Joyra Weatherlight Captain. This is 2 red, blue for a 3/3 legendary human artificer at Mythic. And she's really simple. She says, whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm all for drawing cards. I like the simplicity here. Look, Joyra is not, going to run over the board on her own. She's a 3/3 for 4. That's, not a wizard or whatever, but still, it's just a really solid card if you get to untap because, we found that you can trigger historic. We thought you could. It's just, what do I get for it? And this is what I want. I want cards. So I like Joyra. I think she's fine. She's probably like a B.
I think that Joyra is a build around like, she's probably just a straight B or like a build around like A-. And what I mean by that is she will be fine in any red-blue deck, but if you are taking steps to maximize her, then she might end up being even better than that. So I would not be unhappy first picking Joyra.
All right, yeah, I agree with that. What is Joda Archmage?
This one I would be unhappy. This is 1 blue, red, white, so Jeskai mana, and a 4/3 flying human wizard at rare. It has the additional text of you may pay 1 of each color mana rather than pay the mana cost for your spells. So you can pay 1 white, blue, black, red, green. And that's pretty bad. Like you obviously it makes your imagination go, but that's harder to cast than anything unlimited, like
right?
You're overpaying. You're not playing Emrakul's here. So basically, can your deck support a tricolor 4/3 flyer? The answer is probably no. I think Joda is like a D. And if
me too, just because of the mana cost.
Sure, run this kind of like weird air elemental, but for the most part, you should not be playing Joda.
Yeah, I agree. The ability is basically flavor text, so it is just come down to can you cast it. Next is Muldrotha the Gravetide.
I like this one.
This is you read this one to me. This one looks sweet.
Black, green, blue for a 6/6 legendary elemental avatar at Mythic. During each of your turns, you may play up to 1 permanent card of each type from your graveyard. So basically, you can play a land, a creature, an artifact, and an enchantment from your graveyard.
Wow.
With a little bit of self-mill, not even that much, Muldrotha really goes off. But even just playing like Blood Tallow Candles and cheap creatures out of your graveyard, you're gonna kind of, wash them away in the tide very quickly.
Oh, I love this. And it's a reasonable 6 mana 6/6. Nothing to write home about there because you are casting this for 3 different colors of mana. But when you cast Muldrotha, it's not, a 6/6 is big. Yeah. Like that is going to be oftentimes the biggest creature on the battlefield too.
So far, Muldrotha has seemed worth splashing for. Like
I'm in love.
And so I would give Muldrotha an A-.
Me too. That is value city. Oath of Teferi, not so great. Oath of Teferi is 3 white-blue for a legendary enchantment at rare. When Oath of Teferi enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent you control. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. You may activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice each turn rather than only once.
Oath of Teferi.
So irrelevant text there, and the blinking a permanent you control is not worth 5 mana in 2 colors. So in my mind, we're talking about an F here.
Teferi, Oath of Teferi gets you an F.
Yeah, so we're not taking
that.
It's
not as bad as the next card, though. Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. It's 5 black-white legendary sorcery at rare. So remember, you have to have a legendary creature in play to play it, or a planeswalker. Return all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to your battlefield. So this is just like Kamal's Druidic Vow, where like you need a legend in play and a bunch of other legends to make this card playable, and that's just not going to do the trick. So no. I am not going to be rebirthing any Primevals here. This card just gets a straight-up F.
Yeah, somebody did use it in one of my videos to get back on Sarah's Wings. I think just out of respect for the fact that it was a preview card of ours, but no. Last gold card is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. The big champs here, 3 white-blue for a legendary planeswalker Teferi at Mythic, 4 loyalty, +1, draw a card. At the beginning of the next end step, untap 2 lands. So real simple, +1, draw a card. I like it. -3, that puts Teferi at just 1 loyalty. Put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So you can use it to get rid of something for a while. And then the ultimate is -8. It's no joke there. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and an opponent controls. So whatever, you basically win. I like this card. I would play this.
Yeah, Teferi is just very solid in a blue-white deck. I think that you're going to end up being pretty happy with Teferi as not only a finisher, but also a way to get ahead on board. If you can just play this and bounce their only creature. First of all, they don't even draw it next turn. Second of all, Teferi is going to start ticking up pretty fast, and then untapping your lands doesn't do much unless you have like a lot of instants. But in general, I think this card is going to do the trick for you.
Definitely. A good control card, good way to get ahead on cards, and just a sweet planeswalker with a cool design. This to me hits the real sweet spot for planeswalkers. This is not broken. It's just very powerful, but I'm a big fan. It's probably an A-.
Yeah, I think
right?
I think Teferi's an A-. I think that is a reasonable place to put Teferi.
All right, let's move on to colorless. Now we've got one kind of floating colorless card that we'll start off with, which is Karn, Scion of Urza. Karn is another planeswalker. So 4 colorless mana for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker, Karn at Mythic. +1, reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. I see what you did there. -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. There's kind of a lot going on here with Karn.
Yeah, the third ability is not going to come up all that often. You're going to have 1 or 2 artifacts in play. Mostly it's that you're going to end up drawing a bunch of extra cards off Karn and having a really high loyalty while you do so. I think that Karn is fantastic. I've seen it just do a lot of really good work, and I would take Karn first pick every time because at colorless, it just goes in any deck and is very good.
Yeah, it's stupid. Now, the thing to consider here, though, right, is that Karn does not interact with the board. Like Karn doesn't kill a creature.
No,
Karn doesn't put a creature on the library.
So Karn can make chump blockers, but Karn does protect.
Well, you don't need one though, right? Doesn't it make 1/1s at least? Or
it's for each artifact you control, and you could control no artifacts. Oh, it's an artifact itself. So,
but it is an artifact. Yeah. So I think like there is some line of play where you go like -2 and then -2 again, and you have 2 2/2s. I mean, whatever. I'm not doing that, but I'm just saying. Anyway, but Karn seems like a really great value engine. And as you mentioned, it's a colorless value engine that can be difficult to interact with. So I'm a fan. I mean, it's not quite what I expect out of like my normal bomb planeswalkers. But I will be first picking Karn and never passing.
Karn is a bomb. I think Karn does qualify. Maybe not a bomb in the same vein as like Chandra, Torch of Defiance, but I have no.
Yeah, or Vraska Relic Seeker, cards these planeswalkers that come down and like devastate a board. Karn's not quite that. Karn's more like an incremental advantage, card advantage type thing, but I'm interested in that, shall we say. A- for Karn?
Flat A. I think Karn is
colorless.
Karn is just
flat A.
Colorless is just too powerful.
Okay, I like that. Speaking of colorless, we've got a few artifacts and some lands, and then we're going to call this one a show. First up is Blackblade Reforged. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact equipment at rare. Equip cost 7 mana.
17 million, yes.
And then, but it's got this alternate equip cost, which is kind of cool. If you equip a legendary creature, it's only 3. Now I say only 3 compared to 7, but 3 is still quite a bit. What do you get? Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control.
Yeah, this is beefy. This is beefy, and by the time you can pay the 7, you're getting minimum 7 bonus. And that I found to be very realistic. You just put it on Saplings and you're just good to go. And then if you somehow spike a cheap legendary creature, then you're going to win the game really, really quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
So the question is, how high are you picking Blackblade Reforged?
Oh, first pick. Blackblade Reforged, I think, is a bomb.
Okay.
Like you're just going to be really happy with the effect you're going to get, especially at colorless, and the amount of value you get in a long game. So.
Yeah, and of course it's a historic enabler and blah 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 blah.
So
So you think it's?
I think Blackblade Reforged is an A. Yeah. I think that you could end up in a spot in like later packs where you just know you're not going to have that many creatures, where maybe it's not like a flat A. But I think in most decks, most drafts, you're going to see this and you're going to be like, okay, well, if I just have like a 14 or 15 creature deck, irrespective of how many legendaries I have, I'm going to win the game really easily.
Really? Like that's 7 mana equip in draft? You're thinking that you're going to get away with that?
Yeah, I don't think draft is that fast. And you don't need like a ton of cards like this. Just one card like this is enough to lock up the game. So
be a mana sink in the late part of the game.
Yeah, and
well, I'm not as high on it as you are. I'll tell you that. I have it at like a B.
I think it's an A-.
Okay. We'll see. Yeah, I've seen it on the battlefield with no legendaries, and it looked terrible. I mean, it was just my opponent's like, go, 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 go. It just didn't do anything in a reasonable time frame. So, that can happen. I mean, I am in the market for late game inevitability, and this does give you that, I think. But
look, there's some matchups where this card is going to not be one of your better ones. In fact, it will be a pretty bad one. But I think that there's enough matchups where you're going to play this card and your opponent's going to feel like they can't win.
Okay. Yeah. See, I agree with that first statement, which is why I have a hard time giving an A to a card that says, well, there's some matchups where it's just not very good. I'm like, well, I kind of want my A's to just be good. Yes. So I'm going to give Blackblade Reforged a B, but that is raw power, no doubt about it. And like you said, if you just randomly find a legend, it's just over. What about Forebear's Blade?
So this is very similar to Blackblade Reforged in terms of the effect that it has in the game. It's 3 colorless for an equipment at rare. Equipped creature gets +3/+0, vigilance, trample. When a equipped creature dies, attach Forebear's Blade to target creature you control, and it has an equip cost of 3. So how this card plays,
I like that,
is you equip it, and because the creature has vigilance, they can't just ignore it. And if they trade off, it just you toss the blade to whoever's next. This card plays really well on Saplings. I killed someone out of nowhere with the Thallid Omnivore, the 3/3 that sacks a creature to get +2/+2.
Oh, really?
I just attacked with it.
You made it huge.
Well, I attacked with this. They chumped with a 1/1, so I just ate the creature that had blade, and it gained trample, and just 12 them out of nowhere.
That's awesome.
So
this
does
sweet.
Everything Blackblade does a little faster, except it doesn't. It doesn't give toughness, so you could run out of creatures at a higher rate than you do with Blackblade. But I think it gets a similar grade. I think it's an A-. They're both just really good at punishing the opponent and winning this long game.
Okay, yeah, I'll go B+ on Forebear's Blade. I like this consistency a lot, even if it doesn't quite have the inevitability. Here's a cool one for us to grade in a modern set here. Gilded Lotus, 5 mana artifact. It's rare. It taps to add 3 mana of any one color.
I think like half the decks are going to want Gilded Lotus.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think there's a lot of 2-color decks with not hugely high curves that are just not going to play the card. It doesn't really do much for them. But about half the decks are playing like 3 colors or have 7 or 8 mana kickers or just like mana sinks and have a lot of ways to use the mana. So that indicates to me that Gilded Lotus is like a C+ or something like that.
I agree. Yeah. Very powerful if you have those late game mana sinks like the kickers that you mentioned. Next card's really sweet. It's called Helm of the Host. It's 4 mana for an equipment. It's a legend as well. It's legendary artifact equipment. It's rare. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary. If the equipped creature is legendary, that token gains haste. So you got to be wondering, all right, 4 mana for this. What's my equip cost? It is hefty. It's 5. But this thing can absolutely dominate.
This is not.
No, you get.
I think like 80% of people like read this card and immediately skipped to like, okay, so you sack the creature on a turn. You do not do that.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand right now. By the way, as somebody who thought.
Yeah, me too. And as a result, this card I think is gonna be one of the more powerful cards. It's weird. It's just like Blackblade Reforged and Forebear's Blade in that it's an expensive equipment that will take over the game. I have it at about the same grade. I think it's like about an A-.
Yeah, I was going to give it a B. It is super clunky, but it is absolutely game winning. And by the way, one thing I noticed, Luis, you do not need to put this on a great creature. Nope. You know, I saw somebody put it on a 2/2 and it just spat out a bunch of 2/2s. And it's like, yeah, I'm just going to sit here and win. Like, yeah.
I think
also you're somewhat incentivized to put it on like a mid-grade creature because if they do kill it, at least you still have your other good creatures.
You know, when you put it on a creature that enters the battlefield effect, you really will. Your opponent the meaning of pain. So I think Helm of the Host is going to be an A-. I think you're going to take it a lot of the times you see it. It's going to end a lot of games. Hey, look.
I'm going to go B on Helm of the Host. It's just a little clunky, but boy, what a game ender.
Yeah, I think there are matchups where all these equipment are not going to shine, but I think that enough matchups in this format lend themselves to these that I think you're going to want these cards in your deck.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the difference that we have is that I'm expecting draft to be air quotes normal draft speed, like not a particularly slow format, where I feel like this sealed is very slow. And I'm trying to remember that draft might be much faster where, you know, we would laugh at a card that had an equip cost of 7, right? In like a normal speed set. You're like, what? No, you know, if that's,
I just don't think this is a normal speed set. There's just not the tools for aggro.
Yeah. So there you go.
That brings us to a 5-mana 2/2. Mishra's Self-Replicator is a 5-mana 2/2. It's an artifact creature, assembly worker at rare. It says whenever you cast a historic spell, you may pay 1. If you do, make a token that's a copy of Mishra's Self-Replicator. So what this does is if it survives and you trigger it once, next time you play a spell, both of them trigger. And you get 2 more. Oh. And then if you play another cheap spell, like say, you know, a Navigator's Compass, you could get like 4 more Self-Replicators.
A Navigator's Compass? How about a Mox Amber?
Sure. Basically, the Self-Replicator has the subgame of can this survive the first hit or like the first turn, and then because once you clone it once, presumably you're in good shape, right? Your opponent can't.
Well, you didn't finish the subgame though. It's a subgame of can it survive, and do you have a historic spell?
That is true. But once you made a copy, presumably your opponent can't kill them because they would have killed the first one, and then you just are in a spot where you're just overwhelming your opponent with 2/2s.
Well, you're not though, right?
I think this card's going to play out pretty.
Don't you have to trigger it? Don't you need another historic spell to trigger it, or am I?
Well, you do, but so here's what I kind of want to clarify too, because coming in the heels of both of our reviews, it's not that the historic triggers are hard to get; it's that the payouts aren't very good. Easy. Like Sarah Disciple gets a ++1 till end of turn when you play a historic spell. It's a 1/1 flyer. Another 1/1 flyer, Artificer's Assistant lets you scry 1. Those are just not good triggers.
Yeah, even the Trapper only lets you tap things proactively. Like you can't even do it defensively.
Right. So it's not that I'm sitting here like, saying it's impossible to trigger historic. It's that why do you care that much? The payoffs just aren't there. And in this case, the payoff is there. So I think that you're going to end up building decks with historic triggers for this card a decent amount of the time. And I like the Self-Replicator. I think that it's worth building around.
I'm having a hard time getting on
You're
board
going to lose
with
to
the
this
Mishra
card, I
self.
think. And I think you're going to be happy taking it. Like, I'm not saying take this over Sheevan Fire or Eviscerate or even like Blessed Light or any of those things. Though actually, you might take it over Blessed Light. But I think it's going to end up being like a solid build around B. Just not a card you're going to complain about.
I'm going to give it a build around D.
Okay.
I'm a skeptic. I'm just a skeptic. Like, I think that we're asking a lot. Like, it's very easy to kill. So if your opponent, if you're going to go off, if they know you've built your deck in that way, they're going to try to kill it. And then also you do need to keep triggering it. Like I agree with you. I mean, we said this, but it's not difficult to trigger a Stork, but it's also not free. Like, not everything triggers it. So I'm going to build around Dion Mishra's Self-Replicator, which, by the way, could have totally been the name of Helm of the Host.
Yes, that is.
Next is Mox Amber, 0 mana for a legendary artifact at Mythic. Taps to add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. People are trying to break this for Modern, but I have not. I had an opponent play it against me at the pre-release, and I breathed a small sigh of relief because it just doesn't.
No, this card, is just too hard to be on when you want it to be on, and by the time you do enable it, like, kind of who cares. So Mox Amber is, I think, just a straight up. It's an F unless you get a deck that's like super, super, super deep on historic stuff, but that's just not going to happen.
Yep. Well, you mean on legendary creatures?
No. I mean on historic triggers. Like if you
to trigger it for 0.
If you're just in a spot where you just really want artifacts, but I don't think that's going to happen very often. So
no, I got
Mox Amber gets an F.
What about Thran Temporal Gateway?
So it's a 4 mana artifact at rare. It's legendary, and it says 4 tap. You may put a historic permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is just another F. There's just no historic cards that not that there's no historic cards that are worth doing this for. But there's not a high enough concentration that you're going to play an entire card in order to enable them. So just don't play the Gateway. It is not a good card.
No, it's really bad. And don't be tempted by, I can instance. No, it's not worth a card in any case. 2 more artifacts to go, and then just a few lands, and we're done. Traxos, Scourge of Krug is next. I tried to make this work, Luis. It's 4 mana for a 7/7 trample legendary artifact creature construct at rare. 4 mana, 7/7 trample, but there's bad news. It enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step. But whenever you cast a historic spell, you untap it.
I think Traxos is great. I would first pick Traxos without a second thought.
That's awesome.
There's just enough ways to trigger historic. You just play your Skittering Surveyor. You already want to do that. Put a short sword in your deck. That's fine too. I have not found that to be unpleasant. Get random legendaries. And the cool thing about Traxos is you only really need to untap Traxos twice probably to get good value.
Agreed.
Just hits for so much damage. Yeah. Also, you don't have to attack. So you could untap Traxos and just say go. If you don't have a way to untap it and you want to block something. So,
yeah, I mean, it goes against the spirit of Traxos and the game of Magic.
It's true.
You could do that. Also, we should mention we should also mention the combo with the little Voltaic guy.
Yeah, the Servant, the 1/3 that untaps artifact end of turn. That is good.
Yeah, that's a nice little 1/2 punch there. You just get to untap Traxos every turn.
I would give Traxos a B+. I think that you're going to be pretty happy taking Traxos early.
Okay, I'll say B on Traxos. Last card is Weatherlight. It's 4 mana for a legendary artifact vehicle. This is pretty cool. It's mythic rare, and it's a 4/5 with flying. Its crew cost is 3. So right there, pretty solid, right? 4/5 flying with a crew cost of 3. It's not insane.
The average deck would be happy to play that at those stats. This is a format, I think, where a 4/5 flyer is really good, and you can afford to tap 3 creatures.
Agreed. Yeah, 3 power. Yeah. And it has an ability, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 5 cards of your library and you can reveal a historic card from among them and put it in your hand and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So it's just a card advantage engine that's kind of digging for your best stuff in many cases, like your legendaries and that kind of stuff. So that's good too. I had this in my deck. It was very solid. Like it didn't feel broken. It didn't feel like I could never lose. Yeah. And I also got to crew it with Joyra. So I was like, I did it. Anyway, the Weatherlight was very solid. I would always play it. I think it's a good card. I would give it like a B+.
Yeah, I like B+ on Weatherlight.
Yeah. a weird land. It's called Cabal Stronghold. It's a rare. It taps for colorless, or you can pay 3 mana, tap it to add black for each basic swamp you control. So the question is, are you running this in your whatever black-red deck where you've got 9 swamps?
No, this card is flat unplayable unless you're literally mono black, at which point it's fine, but it's not even that exciting. So save this one for constructed. I think Cabal Stronghold gets a like an F, except in the case of mono black.
Build around D or whatever. Yeah. All right. And then that leaves us with 5 more cards, but they're all the same. These are reprints. They're dual lands. They're Clifftop Retreat, Hinterland Harbor, Isolated Chapel, Sulphur Falls, and Woodland Cemetery. And these make enemy colors, right? Or wait, are these pairs? Yeah,
these enemy colors like red, white, or blue, red, or black, green. And they all enter the battlefield tapped unless you control a land of the 2 types they tap for mana for. So like Woodland Cemetery taps for black and green, enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. These are
great little splashable fixing things, but they're rare. I don't think you're going to be first picking them or anything like that. So it's just
play these if you're the 2 colors, and they're worth taking like mid to late pack if you don't know what colors you are exactly, because you might splash. But yeah, nothing special going on here.
No, these are C's or whatever. You'll know when you want them. Yeah, just don't, the key is don't dedicate a really high pick to these thinking that they're important. They're just nice to haves. Okay, that's going to do it for the Rare and Mythic Rare review. This set looks good to me. Like, I remember the last few we did, we were really kind of shocked at how many A's we came away with. And I don't feel that way here. There's some stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. They didn't mess around with some of these bombs. But at the same time, there's some interesting kind of exploring some space stuff. And there's some also just kind of like right where you want them style rares as well. And I appreciate that. I think it's a good mix.
Yeah, I think that there's no Scarab Gods or Glory Bringers running around. But there's also a lot of really good cards. I still think I think my early front runner for best card in the set might actually be In Bolus's Clutches still. So,
okay.
Uncommon being the best card is kind of interesting, but we'll see where that ends up landing. And so far, I'm excited to kind of play more drafts and see how that goes.
Yeah, that's of course the big question mark coming out of this is the draft format, its speed. Like my guess is that it's average. You're thinking it's a little on the slower side. Maybe it's even fast. Who knows? We'll have to figure that out as we go. I can tell you one thing, at least at the pre-release, the sealed format was very slow. So if that's any indication, then you might be on the right track there, Luis. And we'll be talking about that next week on the show. We're going to have our initial impressions. So Luis and I will have a bunch of drafts under our belt by then, and we'll be able to tell you what we think. And that'll include, of course, include some of our revisits to the cards that we changed our evaluations on from both set reviews, and tips and tricks and little combos. We'll probably be talking about some archetypes, all that kind of stuff to help keep you evolving as the limited format does. We'll see you there next week. And I'll remind you, the show is brought to you by channelfireball.com. That's the place to go for selling cards too. I know you normally think about it for buying cards, and that's good. You should do that because they're good at that. But they're also good at buying them. You can sell them back to them. They have a buy list. You can browse the prices ahead of time so you know exactly what you're getting. Then you package them up, send them in. And if you want to trade them in, they're going to give you 30% bonus. That's right, 30% on store trade-in. So if you want more stuff from CFB, this is the way to get it. Or you can just get cash too. If you just need money for something else, you can do it that way as well. And I highly recommend doing that. You don't want to let those rares. I mean, did you go to 2 pre-releases? Did you end up with 12, 13, 14, 15 rares sitting around that you're kind of never going to put into a real deck, or maybe you're going to just rot in your trade binder? Send them in. Get some Dominaria, get a draft with your friends, etc. So that's channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. So if you want to find links to all the stuff that we do, it's right there on the front page. Luis, you streamed the other day. I'm assuming that maybe we'll get a little Dominaria stream out of you at some point. Of course, you can find YouTube channels, all that stuff at lrcast.com. That is going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
Marshall, I have really good news.
What do you got?
The bane of your existence, the scourge of modern play, has now gotten a rules change in order to curtail its awesome power.
This actually happened, didn't it?
Yes, it is no longer legal to put Dryad Arbor by your lands. It's still unfortunately legal to play Dryad Arbor in the tournament, but there is a rules change. And I actually wanted to bring it to the attention of the listeners because this is something that might slip by you. There's a couple very relevant things. The most exciting one is that you have to keep all permanents that are also creatures in front of your lands in the non-land area. So again, no more hiding of Dryad Arbors. But here's some things to run down. All publicly derived information, so life totals, poison count, city's blessing, all those things. If the status of those changes, you have to inform your opponent. So when you get the city's blessing, you have to tell them. When you get, take damage off one of your pain lands, any of those things, you have to let your opponent know. The other thing is that you have to actually organize your cards such that your lands are in the back and your spells and non-land permanents are in the front. Which I guess also means that I probably shouldn't put lands in front when I get a feature match. But
you know that was the rule then too, right?
Anyway, so
all they did is expanded the coverage rules to everybody else. That's what they've done here.
I really like these rules changes because it just, first of all, because of the Dryad Arbor placement thing, it prompted Marshall to make a flood of clickbait videos, which we would have otherwise avoided. But it's also just pretty unpleasant, like gaming the system this way. And if there's anything that I can impress upon LR listeners, it's like, don't try to win with tricks like that. You don't want to end up on the grifter side of a genius or grifter, which unfortunately will get less material now that now that these rules changes have happened. But I'm sure
we've got. By the way, we've got a couple of suggestions for genius or grifter that I got to throw at you. I think we're going to have one soon.
And trust me, knowing Magic players, the library will fill up very quickly. But yeah, I don't think you should be looking to get your tiny edges. I think there's plenty of really good ways to do that and really smart ways. And hiding Dryad Arbors among your lands is not one of them. So not only should you not do it, it's no longer legal to do so. So keep that in mind and maybe just don't play Dryad Arbor. Who knows?